I was just saying that, any step towards understanding condition monitoring and threshold-based solutions, and even if you are investigating a predictive maintenance solution within your environment, is fantastic, because a lot of that understanding and journey to a mature predictive maintenance solution is great.
Okay, I think we can go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. Those that have joined, thank you very much for joining us on this today, the first of our Senseye webinars on predictive maintenance. Just as a brief introduction for those who are online that perhaps haven't met myself, my name is Terence Keek, and I look after the food and beverage vertical. So yeah, I'd just like to take this opportunity and just thank you all for joining us and welcome you onto this, and look forward to perhaps having a bit of a more interactive conversation with you guys going forward. Any questions, please feel free to type them in the question section in the chat, and we will try and answer them. In addition, after today's session, we have set up a Teams call as well. If you would like to have a more interactive discussion afterwards, it will be a combined interactive discussion. Please feel free, and we can send you out the link to join us. Alternative, reach out to us and we can set up an individual call and have a chat with you guys individually. But yeah, I think with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jonathan Bono, our gentleman who's going to be doing the presentation today on Senseye and giving us an in-depth look into Senseye Predictive Maintenance. Jonathan, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Bonner. I'm the Head of Solution Engineering for Senseye Predictive Maintenance within Siemens. My background is in condition monitoring and reliability, and really a lot of my experience came from running condition monitoring programs and assessments in South African manufacturing. So this is food and beverage, automotive, metals, mining, pharmaceutical, and a full range of others. But really, for Siemens Senseye, the solution engineering department is there to help assess an environment, a customer's use case in the very early stages. So this is to help identify what the impact of predictive maintenance will be within a customer's environment, but then to help assess assets, where are we going to drive value, or where is the value lying that we could run the project on, what data we're going to be using. We help to assess the infrastructure, resourcing, because without people and people engagement and involvement, it really is difficult to get things moving. So we make sure that we have the right people in the room for the project, and also to steer the success criteria so that from the very early stages, we have our end goal in sight, and we know that we are targeting the success of the project throughout the planning and implementation stages. So thank you very much. I guess I should also give a bit of an introduction to Senseye and what Senseye is all about. Essentially, Senseye is an automated asset intelligence platform. It takes in condition monitoring data, such as pressure, current, torque, vibration, temperature, speed, flow, cycle time, whatever is relevant to identify normal condition of an asset or a machine or an operation, and then to highlight signs of degradation. The application will also take in operating context, such as speed for a variable speed application, or very specific to the food and beverage sector, a batch identifier, so that we understand the differences in data condition considering different batch requirements and production. And then the third form of data is maintenance data. So the application will ingest these forms of data, identify a baseline understanding of what normal behavior is, and then highlight signs of degradation. But it goes much further than that. Yes, it is using online condition monitoring data, but it has a huge amount of intelligence behind it. So the more interaction it has with users and the more information it has, it can start to be very specific around what those signs of degradation are. What are your possible causes of degradation or failure, and what recommended maintenance actions should you be taking? And another layer on top of that is our Senseye Copilot, our generative AI functionality, making the information provided by the application accessible to everyone in their native language. It also assists with data analysis, because not everyone has data analysis analysis experience, and it really does start to bring in and capture the knowledge from your maintenance teams and the personnel on site. Making sure that every time they interact with the system, that is stored and then made available the next time it is relevant. So that is Senseye, and really, really happy to be here today. Thank you. Nenya, as our host for today, I believe you are on mute.
Sorry, I've been speaking to myself. Thank you very much for that. I think I'd like to start with a poll before we go into the topics of discussion. Jonathan, I don't know if you just want to jump into it or if we should start with our first poll.
I think, yeah, before we get into the first poll, why don't we discuss traditional condition monitoring and where that is applicable and how we've evolved from there? Because I did mention about traditional condition monitoring and using condition monitoring data. So I'm sure that a lot of the people online today will have an idea of traditional condition monitoring and may even be using some of these techniques. So this is where I started off my professional career, for example. Let's say this is vibration analysis. You'll have a condition monitoring engineer come around in your site, or maybe you even have someone in-house who is doing this in your facility. And they will go around the facility on a route-based, time-based approach, taking manual measurements from the machines. Once they finish their route, they would then go upload that information to the computer, do manual analysis, and then report back to the maintenance teams around any alarming notifications or signs of degradation. And this approach has been fantastic and has had great benefits in industry for decades now. But the limitations I see is that, or at least that I've experienced, is that when you're going on the route-based, time-based analysis approach, you are capturing the machine at that point. Now, let's say we're looking at a centrifugal pump as the example. You go around, you'll take a measurement from the non-drive end, drive end of the motor, and the drive end, non-drive end of the pump. But you don't really know what the pump is doing. Is it pumping the same viscosity of liquids through? Does it have the same output requirements as the last time? Is the motor running at the same speed? There's very little context around what the machine is doing. It's just a snapshot at that point in time. And also, if you are waiting 3, 6, 12 months between these inspection points, there is a lot of gap and a lot of things, negative things that could happen to this centrifugal pump in that time period. So you never really have a full visibility. It's really about what can we capture, and hopefully we capture the right thing at this point in time. So the principles of traditional condition monitoring are solid, 100%. However, in this day and age, we found that having continuous visibility, especially in today's production environments and the requirements on manufacturing these days, is a much better approach. So having online or near real-time data capture, analysis, sampling, reporting is fit for purpose. Then there are other factors such as threshold-based systems. So quite often we have partnerships with these companies as well. A company, let's go again for vibration analysis, they will have their range of sensors which connects to the gateway, and they will have a software solution, whether that is on-premise or even cloud-based. But that solution is quite often a threshold-based. So you may have the company come in and do the installation. They'll do the assessment of what is the motor, what size is the motor, how is it mounted, is it rigid or flexible mounting. They can set up parameters around what the bearing code is, and the specifics around the bearing, and they would set up limits or alarms or thresholds, so that when that vibration does go above a certain point, the site team are notified. But again, when I discussed earlier about you don't really know what the machine is doing. You don't know what the speed it is. You have no operating context around that. So what we found is a lot of our customers who have this similar system in place, they will have their first limits set up by the provider. Fantastic. But then maybe they change production, or maybe they are trying to go for a higher production output, so they have to increase the load on their machines and systems. Therefore, the original threshold which was set is no longer fit. So then they have to go and change that threshold. Fantastic, but again, you may need to change your operational requirements, your operational outputs, and that threshold then needs to be adjusted. So quite often what is happening is site teams, the responsible people on site for condition monitoring, reliability, maintenance, are spending a huge amount of time resetting thresholds and limits. They're getting overly notified for normal operational change. And again, as I said, spending time resetting thresholds. And what is required is something much more dynamic than that. And this is where predictive maintenance comes in. It's about automating the understanding of machines and that change in operating condition. It's about providing sites and maintenance teams with much more than just a simple threshold violation. It really is about looking at the behavior of the assets, understanding the different types of behaviors at different times, different batches, different states, and giving intelligent recommendations around that behavior rather than, it's above this limit, you need to go and check it.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. I guess you just answered my question, because I was going to ask, what is the difference, that predictive maintenance brings, and what are the options that it presents to our customers?
Fantastic. But I think if we have the poll available, this would be a good point to get interaction from our group online.
Please let me know if you... It would be great to see what our customers actually have currently in the... Sorry, can you guys see the poll?
Yes, that has come through.
We can, but it's blocked by the videos. The bottom left there. If you can put it more in the middle.
Okay, I'll just... Sorry.
Oh, we're getting some responses.
Sorry. I'm trying to... Sorry, Jonathan.
No?
Okay, I can't move. Can you see it clearly now?
That's okay. I think everyone votes on the poll, and that's probably more important. So the question is, are you currently utilizing traditional condition monitoring, any threshold-based solutions, or do you have a predictive maintenance strategy underway? So far we've got nothing at all, 25%. Don't you worry, that is quite common. Quite often maintenance teams are busy, or maintenance teams, production teams, the project teams we engage with, they're busy doing their day job. Having additional monitoring or additional maintenance practices or inspection practices is just so far away from where they currently are, because they are having to react. Yes, some traditional condition monitoring is quite popular. That is fantastic. It's really good to know that that you are making use of some of these technologies, really making asset and machine condition available. And we've also got some for threshold-based solutions, also fantastic. For those who are aware of traditional...
I think we've lost Jonathan.
I was going to say, is that just me, or is that everybody? Sorry about that, everyone. We've got Jonathan frozen. Jonathan, are you back with us?
I hope so, yes.
Yeah, you froze up there for a while.
Okay. I was just saying that, any step towards understanding condition monitoring and threshold-based solutions, and even if you are investigating a predictive maintenance solution within your environment, is fantastic, because a lot of that understanding and journey to a mature predictive maintenance solution is great. So, got the results in for the poll. Fantastic. Thank you all. Lenya, what is next for us to discuss today?
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I think there's something wrong with the Wi-Fi in the office. Next up is the importance of scalability and flexibility.
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier the limitations of condition monitoring and your threshold-based solutions, and the fact that if you're having to continuously adjust your limits, that is not scalable. You know, predictive maintenance, as far as we see it at Senseye, is it's not about monitoring your most critical assets on site. It's not about covering that 1% that if something were to happen, the entire factory goes down, and that's all we look at. Yes, of course, we do still monitor those highly critical assets, but it's about the balance of your plant. It is about being truly scalable for everything that you have within your environment. Because really, if you look at your highly critical assets, they typically don't fail. You will have a very good planned maintenance approach of these. You'll be spending a lot of money and a lot of time making sure that these are maintained and that you don't have any negative events happen on them because of how critical they are. However, a huge amount of maintenance personnel's time is going to be spent on those reactive ones. The pump that goes down here, the centrifuge that goes down there, the lift which isn't working. And that causes delays, huge amounts of trouble within your production and the ability to manufacture what it is you are manufacturing. So scalability, having one solution which is applicable for everything on site is important, because what you really don't want is to have 20 different solutions doing 20 different things, 20 different platforms that you need to log in or view or analyze every day, because that way it will never get done. You want something which is fit for purpose for everything you have in your environment, something which doesn't require manual input every day to readjust, and something which is going to give you great insights into everything within your plant. So a one-size-fits-all approach. And that is what we believe is important. You know, being able to monitor everything from the small conveyor motors all the way through to your most critical assets on site.
And does this affect the product quality in any way?
Well, I would say it has a very positive effect on product quality, because when you have better reliability of your machines and operations, you have better visibility of their conditions and maybe a tolerance creep within your systems. You can then have a much better approach on maintaining these, making sure that your machines are running well, that the tolerances are well set, that your output quality is, you're maintaining a great output quality because you have a great reliability program in place for your assets. And speaking of quality, Terence, Jacques, how is the South African manufacturing market addressing quality at the moment? Is it a major concern?
Terence, you grab this one from a vertical approach.
No problem. Sorry, I was trying to get to my mute button there. From a quality perspective, yes, I think it's definitely a common scenario in South Africa. A lot of businesses are doing regular tests, compliance and quality, just to make sure that products that are going out are of a great standard. Certainly in your more sensitive sort of food and beverage industries, the dairy industry. In fact, I would even put it in the brewery perspective as well, which is very similar to your dairy industry. So, yes, quality is definitely high up there. Our consumers are actually expecting quality as well. So I think that's definitely has a very, very high place on the agenda for sure.
Yeah, and what type of checks are being regularly done? You mentioned the dairy industry. So what are those quality type of checks that are regularly being done by the teams on site?
You'll find very often that you've got guys taking samples off the line during production at various points in the production process, accessing be it just the product inside, your packaging, all that sort of thing. So I think there's definitely various points along the filling process and the packaging process and production process that's been followed for sure.
Yeah, from a Senseye perspective, we've got customers all over the world in a range of different sectors. But it's amazing how we've been able to use process parameters to have great impact on reliability. For example, we've been looking at rollers that have product coming in, and they are supposed to give a certain gauge of product coming out. That then goes into the cutting process and baking, and then into the packaging. So just being able to monitor the output gauge, the width of the product coming out between the rollers, that is a process and quality related parameter. However, by monitoring that and seeing abnormal behavior in your exit gauge, that has given us indication that the rollers were starting to deform. So it is really working hand in hand with process, quality, and condition monitoring data to get a complete view of condition. And in that type of circumstance, that would have only been picked up when the batch was tested. But Senseye was able to spot that very early on before it caused a quality problem, because, we're looking at small changes that have big impact. And yeah, they were able to save at least 2 or 3 batches from needing rework or complete scrap just by monitoring something like that.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think it'll also be interesting to know from our audience which of the following options are important in the environment.
So yes, everybody would like to know what is important. Is it improving overall equipment effectiveness, ensuring your product quality or compliance, or do you have sustainability and carbon footprint goals?
I think if I can add something there, Jonathan, if you don't mind, just from my perspective of what I've actually experienced with many of my customers around that sort of area of the environment, and I think certainly one of the biggest things is efficiency, OEE. I believe in actually looking at that. It's coming up high on the agenda there. Your smallest amount of gain can have a huge impact. And I talk within the beverage industry specifically, within your carbonated soft drinks, brewing industries, where you're running at high volumes, and the smallest a 1% increase makes a huge difference. So I think that from my perspective is quite high on the agenda, definitely.
Absolutely. And, we've worked with, especially our customers within the UK and European areas. And OEE, as I'm sure everyone knows, is calculated on many factors, but one of them is the available time. If you can increase that available time because you're doing less reactive, you're doing less planned interventions, you have better planning of your maintenance schedules, you have better foresight of what your production runs can be, just that alone has a huge impact on your OEE. If we were to assess an environment and say, fine, packaging line 1, we are actually going to, we could forecast that we would be able to give you an extra 50, 100, 150 hours of production time on that line 1. Isn't that alone worth the investment? Isn't that going to have huge impact on your production output for the year and your OEE numbers overall? Absolutely. Right, got some good feedback from the poll. I would say improving OEE is definitely a top contender there. We've mentioned sustainability, and I think maybe it's a good point for me just to discuss how a solution like Senseye or a predictive maintenance solution can impact your sustainable footprint. This is something where we always have to say to a customer, if you have sustainability goals, this isn't going to come within your first 6 to 12 months. We're not going to have a huge impact on your plant sustainability in the initial stages, because there is a period of learning, there's a period of implementing, there's a period where we are training the maintenance and user groups of the system, and there's a period of building trust and adoption of a new system. All of that does take time, but it is a solid foundation. Also, we're not typically starting a project on every single machine and asset within an environment. We will help to assess which areas, assets, machines have the highest impact, and we'll start on those, and then create a structured project plans so that we can increase adoption and usage of the application or the solution to the wider base of the plant. But when you start to look at projects where we're doing not 50, not 100 assets, but 500, 1,000, we are on the balance of the plant, that is when we have impact on sustainability. Because now a company has less time spent idling because a certain part of the line has gone down. There's less replacement of parts and spares and consumables used, less emergency transportation of these components. And I'll give you an example of that. We notified a customer of ours in North America in the food and beverage space that something was going wrong on one of their main motors. This was at the start of our engagement, the start of a project, and the maintenance team didn't really take it very seriously, and the motor failed. So I think everyone got a little slap on the wrist and told, next time Senseye notifies you, please take this seriously. So they replaced the motor, it carried on running, and then after about 2 weeks from the replacement, Senseye started to notify again. But now they took it very seriously. They took the notification very seriously. We saw an increase in temperature on the main motor, and what they found was that it was the heat exchanger was blocked, so it wasn't effectively cooling the system. So if that had to have overheated, they don't have a spare in their stores. It would have taken them 3 weeks to transport this a spare from somewhere in Europe over to North America to get their operations running again. But what they were able to do is unclog the heat exchanger, and everything returned back to normal state. So now they didn't have lost production, which they would have had. They didn't have to transport and ship in the replacement, because they were able to have insights, very early insights, do something small, which had quite a big impact on their production, but also the cost for that repair.
I think that also helped, Jonathan. Nenya, if you don't mind me, Jonathan, again, I think something that I've taken from that, from my perspective, which I think is critical within the production. Very often we look at the problem and we want to try and solve. You said you replaced the motor and it went again 2 weeks later. It helped to identify that as a larger problem, isn't it? And sort of finding the cause instead of only identifying the problem, but the cause of that particular problem. And I think that, for me, is quite a critical perspective within the production facility as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just have one question on my end, sorry, Jonathan.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, what role do you see predictive maintenance playing in the broader context of of the current industrial 4.0 and the digital transformation? I don't know if you understand my question.
Yes, absolutely. So digital transformation, industry 4.0, these are all very, very nice buzzwords, but they are a factor that everyone needs to be aware of and considering, because with technology these days, especially in the competitive markets, if you're not investing in digital transformation, you will eventually be left behind. Your competitors are going to be investing in this, and they're going to have better intelligence, better automation, better outputs, more reliable systems because of where we are today in technology. So whenever we are assessing a customer's environment, one of the first things we do is look at their infrastructure. What is available? So I've mentioned the data that we need for Senseye or for predictive maintenance implementation. But when we're assessing a customer's environments, we look at all of the layers. So does a customer have dedicated condition monitoring systems in place? So online threshold-based solutions, as we've spoken about. Sensors in place which are collecting data and maybe in their own or feeding into the wider infrastructure. Then what level of automation does the customer have? So this could be PLCs, drives, inverters, all with very relevant forms of data in them. Maybe the customer has got edge processing devices and dedicated edge systems for looking at OEE or energy management or whatever that may be, that has got relevant data. Quite often, a customer or a company will have SCADA systems in place. So we help to assess all of these, really to see where is the relevant data. And then as Siemens, where we see gaps in these, we can assist to build up the capability of those levels of digital infrastructure. Our best implementations, the ones that go the fastest, I would say, the ones that have a really smooth investigation and implementation process, is where the customers have already invested in digital capability or an increase in digital capability. So maybe they have run energy management processes before, or they are looking at OEE improvements, and they've invested in getting those systems available, talking to each other, and making that data more available. And that for us is an absolute win, because we know that they're getting benefit from a different solution, but we can access the same data or very similar data for the use of predictive maintenance. And as I said, as Siemens, where there is gaps and where we see missing links, we can help to assist only where necessary, to fill in those gaps in a very interoperable way. We want to play ball with multiple OEMs and multiple vendors. One solution can speak to a range of different infrastructure points through a range of different communication protocols, but also then, more importantly, make the information accessible outwards. So for Senseye specifically, we have an open architecture, an open infrastructure, which allows us to put the information provided by the application into whatever system you have on site. We can make that link available. So a very easy example of this is an integration with Microsoft Teams. So yes, the application is raising notifications, but if your teams are using Microsoft Teams to communicate, run the daily stand-ups or whatever it may be, well, why not put the information in there? Or let's say you have those lighting stacks, which you quite often find on the side of the side of a line. Typically that will say either running, idling, or stopped. It will give you that indication. Well, we can repurpose those, or I say we, I mean the customer with us can help repurpose those. And your red, amber, your green, amber, red are now indications of the asset's condition. So you have visually an idea of, is it in a normal, good state? Do we need to pay a little bit of attention to it, or is there something seriously going wrong and we need to pay a lot of attention to this?
You mentioned infrastructure, and my question is to either Jacques or Terence. And considering that South Africa faces challenges with infrastructure and connectivity, is that a factor in any way?
Yes, definitely. So from a digital perspective and digitalization perspective and transformation, there's definitely a focus, and there's an interest within the Savory market for that. We find many of our customers are perhaps at the sort of low end of the maturity perspective, and with respect to a lot of our customers, but the initiation and the interest is definitely there, and the growth into looking at that sort of thing is definitely important to them. I think the identifying, and I quite like that actually your example there, Jonathan, about the lights. I mean, at a given point, you can actually walk past there and see anybody can walk past and say, right, guys, we need this machine needs some attention. As soon as it's on an amber, there should be plans being put into place. So yes, I think from a digitalization perspective, there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of guys looking at that. In terms of the maturity, and it just depends on the particular factory at the time, but yes, it's there for sure.
Terence, the advice I always give to our customers is, don't do upgrades to your digital infrastructure for the sake of it. Always have a use case in mind. Always have a need, and then work backwards. So whether that is predictive maintenance, your teams are mainly running reactive. They are very stressed out. You've got guys working tens of hours of overtime every week. Now you have a use case. Fill in the blanks. Work your way backwards to get to the end point. Maybe you have a need for a digital twin. Let's say you want to be able to plan out every type of scenario. What if we introduce this new batch? Our chewing gum has got a different viscosity. What's going to happen to the structural integrity of the mixer? Whatever it may be, You have a use case, work your way back. Because quite often, you'll find you have various points of that infrastructure already existing. You're not going to need to reinvest and clear out everything and start again. It is just about filling in those little blanks, but don't do it for the sake of it. Work on your use case first, and then we can address the rest.
I think Jonathan, you've hit a very critical part there for me, and you've just sort of reminded me of a point, and I think that's where very often this digital transformation word becomes a little bit skewed, and people get big, massive investment that has to be made. And I think we need to look at the critical areas of where is it going to have the best impact right now, and what can we do. And I think from a predictive maintenance, and you mentioned earlier as well, energy sort of management. And I think those are the two areas I think that can have the easiest and the most impactful savings and impact on the business immediately, definitely.
Then I think we have a poll around this topic.
Yes, we do. Sorry. Please let me know once you can see it on your screens.
Yes. So for everyone who is going to contribute this, how would you rank your company's digital capability out of 5? This is a self-scoring one. Maybe you think, we are top end, we've got it down. Rank yourself a 5. If you think, we've got something in place, we could be doing better, maybe look at a 3. Or if you are still having to start and stop your conveyors manually, rank yourself a 1 there, please.
I'd like to just say, I think, thanks for the honesty to everyone. and I think that sort of plays into what I said about our digital maturity locally in South Africa. And I think, yes, I don't know if anybody would be above a 3 in terms of that, to be honest with you. I think the guys that are 3 have maybe jumped up there, but I think that's fantastic. It's a good indication of where we are for sure.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, globally, not many companies are really above a 3. If I'm being perfectly honest, we're currently engaging with a company. Unfortunately, I can't give any names, but I can describe it a little bit. This company makes various products, but more specifically, the department that we're dealing with does animal feed and pet care. So when we're assessing all of their plants, they've got 40 around the world. We have to look at each one of their structures and capability. The majority are at a 2 or a 3. Every now and then we may find one which is at a 4. Why? Because they had a need, a requirement, a use case to increase their digital maturity and capability. But quite often, it is a case of we are starting at a very basic point. We need to assist them with the right decisions to increase their digital capability, so that they are future-proof, so that we could run the project now initially, but then also future-proof for whatever campaigns they want to run, going forward. It's not just about spending or investing on, let's say, predictive maintenance now, and the next time you want to do energy management, you need to invest again. It's about future-proofing your investment so that you can do this now, that later, and then follow on from there while reusing these systems.
Do we have, either to Terence or Chalk, do we have any case studies or practical examples locally that have successfully implemented?
Yes, Nene, we do. We know of companies, specifically in the food and beverage industry, or vertical, that have dabbled in the predictive maintenance environment. Yes, the solutions there might not have been as scalable as initially indicated, and I'm still investigating on the premise of the sustainability gains in as far as reduction of energy usage, the reduction of waste, achieving that far better green footprint, which is a global driver nowadays, as well as the financial savings that could be implied. And I think, Jonathan, you can attest to this. This is part of the full scope of profiling that the Senseye team, from a global perspective, can bring to the table. It's a real point-for-point analysis and evaluation of what the achievables and roadmap should be in this instance.
Absolutely. And it's value-based solutions is the core of what we do. So specifically looking at predictive maintenance, when myself and my team are trying to evaluate or project what the value is going to be, we first of all start with a very high level analysis. So, Mr. Customer, let's say they've got 5 or 10 plants in South Africa. All right, let's look at the maintenance hours for these plants. Which one has got the highest maintenance activity? Okay, well, it's the plant in Durban. Fantastic. Let's go into that plant in Durban. Now, you've got receiving, processing, packaging, warehouse, and so on. Very high level areas here. But out of those 4 or 5 areas, which one has got the highest maintenance activity? Well, that's the packaging. Fantastic. Packaging area has got 10 packaging lines. Which one has got the highest maintenance activity? Well, it's packaging line 4. Fantastic. Now we can start to break what in packaging line 4 has got the highest maintenance activity. So we could break it down like that to get to a machine that we want to start with, and then the next one, and then the next one. Before we know it, we have targeted everything which is, for want of a better word, unreliable within that packaging hall, and that's our starting point. Fantastic. But we can take it a step further than that. So the same way that we've now broken 10 factories into areas, into lines, into machines, and so on, we can then start to look at the financial impact of those. So what were your reactive maintenance costs for an area, for a line, for a certain machine type? This is lost production. This is the replacement of spares. This is the time spent, the people factor having to repair this machine in the last 12, 24 months. What is your planned maintenance cost for those areas, assets, machines? This is now the replacements that you're using, the consumables you're using for that, and also the people time. What is the cost of your short stops? Things that are stopped because 5, 10 minutes, a little bit harder to impact with predictive maintenance, but with better reliability, you do have an impact on those short stops. But what are the costs of those for our designated areas? And then what stock, what stores, what inventory are you keeping on site just in case something goes wrong? And if we can then project a reduction in each of those areas, does that give you a projected ROI enough to start the project? Does this drive a business case and a use case in your environment? And quite often, yes, it does. But we have a very structured approach on defining that value for our customers, making sure that we are going to have the best impact, the best buy-in. Because really, if nothing happens within the 12 months of the project, you don't really get buy-in. If you're not giving an ROI within the project, your return of initial investment, you're definitely not going to get in for year 2 and beyond.
John, a question from my side, and knowing the South African mindset and how we will buy a new vehicle if we've kicked the tires and honked the horn and slammed the bonnet. Have you got perhaps some reference cases that we can utilize and showcase to our customers, the ones interested in it, of course, in this environment, as to what it was and where the eventual production, savings, sustainability, all of these aspects were improved by utilizing Senseye?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a fantastic customer success department, which really help to make sure our customers are getting the success within a project. So they help guide once we've implemented, once the trainings happen, once the initial adoption has taken place. That's when the customer success come in, and they really help to engage with the customer, making sure they're getting the best out of the application. But more importantly, that they are recording the wins and building the use case and business case of the success we've been having. So they are really good at capturing individual successes. A notification was raised, the maintenance did X inspection, this was the maintenance event, and this was the value. It was time, it was money, it was planning, whatever it may be. We've got those. We've also got a huge amount of machine knowledge that we have captured together, as well as within our internal departments, that reference to how best to monitor, what type of failure modes we would be looking for or expecting, what type of sensors we would need, what type of OT data are we looking for, and we are in the process of bundling this all together to create this super knowledge of what we are looking for, what we are going to monitor, what we are going to be helping to prevent, and absolute references in those. And yes, we do have that for a full range of factory types, production types, manufacturing types within food and beverage. So if anyone would like to kick the tires, to say, we are prepared for that.
Great. And then just from my personal point of view, unfortunate situation in our region and also globally is what do we and how do we assist the customers because of the skills shortage? Really suitably qualified on the shop floor maintenance teams. It's great having the best predictive maintenance in the world. Yeah. How do you, I don't want to use the word enforce, but how do you flow that through to keeping the lights on and the product flowing out of the door?
Absolutely. So,
Jonathan, sorry, before you carry on with that, can I also add to that, even in terms of where it's not seen as a monitoring solution as well of the particular sort of guys on the shop floor. I think that for me is also quite critical as well, if you don't mind me adding.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off with pure application capability. And for anyone who wants to join our in-depth session, I would say in about 8 minutes from now, you'll get to see this live and you'll be able to ask me questions about it. But then I'm also going to speak around what we do as Siemens, how we can improve that lack of skills, the lack of skills, the skill shortage, the implementation and usage and getting value of a system. So I'll discuss both those points. One, within the application, it learns from every interaction. It learns about the behavior of an asset. It learns about failure patterns. It learns from your maintenance events that you are feeding back into it. And it is presenting the user, the maintenance teams, with the information they need to know. Our Senseye Copilot also works as a virtual reliability engineer. So you can ask it questions. You can really start to drill down, what do I need to do? What inspections should I do? What manual checks should I do based off of this behavior? When has this happened in the past? It's going to present that to you. It's going to give you all of this information. But you'll be able to ask, who do I need to involve in the repair? Really starting to be upfront with the information. I say that it's a bit of a joke, but it is actually a reality that a receptionist can now become a maintenance planner using our Senseye Copilot because it is extremely capable. But it is storing that. And within the application, you can then start to add in expert documentation or expert knowledge in the form of user manuals, maintenance manuals, spare parts lists. So it is a one-stop shop reference for everything you need to know about your assets and reliability. However, that is quite often a factor, but what can we do as Siemens? Well, we can offer these managed services. We can do as little or as much as you would like us to do in your environment. So we can come in and do the sensor installations if it's necessary or required. We can do some updates to your infrastructure and hardware requirements to increase your digital capability. We can even manage the usage of the application. So if you're needing someone to do those checks and be that link between an application or the knowledge that we have, the notifications, and your maintenance teams, we can absolutely do that. Or we could come in and just perform the maintenance for you. So run the entire life cycle of this from investigation, implementation through to repair. So that we can do for customers depending on what their appetites are, where their current pain points are. As I said, as little or as much as is required.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan.
I think, yeah, we've got 5 minutes left of this session. I know we could cover so much more, but to the audience, are there any questions, any burning questions you would like answered at the moment? Please put them in the chat.
I've also shared the Teams link for the debrief and Q&A session in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who would like to come and do a bit more of a deep dive and get to ask the questions face to face, please do join us for that, starting in about 5 minutes.
Please also feel free to share your questions in the chat if you are unable to join the session, so we can make use of the time that we have left in the session.
In the meantime, Jacques, Terence, is there anything you think the audience should know? Any questions you have about Senseye Predictive Maintenance, Siemens services that we could offer around that?
I think just from my side, linking in, I think, I don't know if I'm going back a step here, but I think the big one for me, I think was that from an energy management perspective, and connecting into that. And I've also spoken to a lot of our customers around energy management and that sort of thing, bringing the two sort of together. And I think that for me is quite, if you could touch on that again a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done quite a lot of work making sure that the Senseye application and all of the supporting elements of infrastructure, let's say, are completely interoperable, that we are able to talk with, communicate, interact, push the information to multiple systems, whatever that may be, and not even just Siemens' own portfolio systems. We do play ball with a full range of other suppliers. But when we're looking at a program, and I've got a use case actually, there's a company, they make crisps, you would say in the UK, chips in South Africa. But this company is in Poland. They have gone, based off of their use cases and requirements on site, they have asked Siemens to come in and help with digital twin, energy management, and predictive maintenance. So we're running this on 3 of their cut and pack lines, they call it. And what we've done is on one of the lines, they've gone for digital twin. The next line is energy management. The third line is predictive maintenance. The reason that we've split these 3 solutions across the 3 different lines is it allows us as individual teams to give focus to that line so that we are not bumping into or, creating or causing more chaos than is completely required. So we have had great success in all 3 of those areas. And in fact, last week, my colleague was back in Poland with the wider Siemens team to look at how we expand these out. So this is now, because we understand what the complexity, the project was on these 3 factors on 3 different lines, it's now about scaling it. So we've focused, had success, and now very easily, might I add, because we're integrated and interoperable, it is just a copy and paste onto the next 2 lines for each of the 3 solutions. So now what the customer has is, well, what they will have in the coming weeks is 3 lines with 3 solutions running on it, but we had a structured approach, and they are now having massive benefits from structuring it individually. And now, because it is, for want of a better word again, plug and play, you can, just copy and paste, turn it on, let's say, and now they're getting value for all 3 lines.
Excellent. No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I think we don't seem to have any questions in the chat at this stage. If people have got some time, we will link up onto the Teams call now in the next couple of minutes or so. If there is any questions that you would like to have a bit of a more deeper dive, please join us. And alternatively, please reach out to us via email and let us know through through the various channels. If you would like to have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion around Senseye and predictive maintenance. So I think Jonathan, I'll also just thank you for your time and insight into predictive maintenance. That definitely has helped me to get a little bit more of a better insight. It's an area that is regularly spoken about, but I don't want to say not understood, but definitely is something that we would like to have more insight into, and I think that our customers would like to sort of expand into. So, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to joining you and perhaps coming down to South Africa and joining us. There is still that South African accent in the background, so come home and visit us.
It's still there. It's still there.
So, and thank you very much to everybody for joining us. It's really been appreciated, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks all.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.